Good morning, good afternoon, guys. And we're going to start the webinar now. So if any of you have any questions, unfortunately, Livestorm doesn't like you to jump in. You're going to have to type it out in the question tab. But other than that, we'll be happy to answer any questions during the course of the presentation. So my name's Tom Schoen. I'm I'm running Eaglet Eye at the moment for North America, and enjoying what I'm doing. And it's fun to be on the cutting edge of scleral topography and scleral lens fitting. With me today is Renier Storteller. I think most of you guys know him. He is the head of professional affairs for Eaglet, and he is located in Utrecht, the Netherlands. Say hi, Renier.
Hi, thank you.
And also on the line in the background is Arnaud Snap-Berengers, or Arnie, as we all know him. Now, we're lucky you're not going to be able to hear him, but he's there. So with that, we will get things rolling. And so what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about scleral topography. Then I'm going to do a quick intro to ESP, what it's all about. Then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Renier, who's going to go through image acquisition, the amazing information on the ESP can share. We're going to review about 3 cases. We're going to start with the simplest normal, quote unquote, normal keratoconus, then move into asymmetrical scleral tortuosities, and then finish up with a pinguecula and show you how the ESP makes fitting these types of lenses so much more efficient. Then when Renier's finished up, I'll come back, I'll wind up, I'll talk to you a little bit about our partner labs, particularly in the US. That's where my knowledge is based. Then the reality of lab neutrality, in other words, what we really mean by that phrase, and then a quick look at return on investment, and then talk about next steps. So, gentlemen, there's only 2 people in attendance, but there were like 20 people that signed up. So I'm assuming and I'm hoping that they'll watch the recording. So you guys can jump in anytime you want with a question or a chat, and I'll keep my eye on it and let Renier know when we should jump in. Anyway, I believe, and I think that Renier and Arnie share my opinion, that scleral topography is the future, especially lens fitting, particularly scleral lenses. The more we learn about the sclera, the more designs advance, and the more scleral topography is needed. So I look at this as a sort what I unfortunately going to term a vicious cycle. It's not vicious. There's nothing vicious about it. We're learning a lot of stuff as we move forward. But the more we learn about the sclera, the more we realize how complex it is. The more we need scleral topography to fit as best as we can. And to that point, I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that diagnostic lenses are going to be a thing of the past in 5 years. I think in 5 years at GSLS 2025, we're going to be laughing about diagnostic lenses. Do you remember those trial lenses? I could see that coming. And there's tremendous interest in scleral topography, which is evidenced last year at GSLS and other places, and we're going to see that again this January in Las Vegas and other meetings. So the Eaglet Eye in particular, what sets that apart? Well, the technology is based on profilometry, which is different than a traditional corneal topographer. It's based on reflected light. We can get into that with Renier if you want. The accuracy and the diameter of the image, you can take an image up to 20 millimeters in diameter of the eye surface with our unit, which is more than enough for the average scleral lens at 16 or 17 millimeters in the US. We rely on a single shot, in other words, one image. While you're there and the patient is instilled with fluorescein, we suggest you take 2 or 3 shots, but we're not going to stitch those 3 shots together. The best of the 3 images is what you're going to use to make your decisions on. And with that data, we take into consideration 500,000 data points. So it's a very, very highly accurate instrument, leading to the reality that there's 20 microns resolution at the cornea and 10 microns on the sclera. So that's plenty of resolution and a lot of data and information. We'll get into lab neutrality later on, but we consider that a strength of the ESP. And that means that we have at the moment 37 plus lens designs across 17 labs. So we have a wide variety of lens designs, and that list is growing. And I'll talk about that a little later, get into some detail. But at the moment, I will turn it over to sorry for the typo, the head of professional relations, Rainier Storteller.
Thank you, Tom. You can hear me perfectly. All right,
Yes.
I will start. And I'm changing my mouse to a pointer. That's helping me.
Good morning, Dr. Resnick.
All right. I will talk about. I will start talking about the coverage and how you take a scleral measurement. And what Tom already pointed out, we can measure up to 20 millimeters, horizontal as well as vertical. We believe that the eyelids are not really that big problem. You have to open them very well. But the vertical opening between the orbital bones is 35 millimeters. So that's much more than the 20 millimeters we can measure. We believe that if you ask a patient to look up or look down, that you are changing the shape of the conjunctiva. The conjunctiva is really fluffy, so it's in some patients it's really going everywhere. And stitching that together, looking up, looking straight forward, looking down, means that you have to smooth a lot. So you're losing a lot of information. So therefore, we always take a shot just looking straight forward.
So Rainier, your screen is visible, but it's a third of the main screen. So is there any way you can expand that?
I will do
There we
that.
go.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you for telling me. All right, let me continue. And we have to use fluorescein if we want to take an image from the sclera. Without fluorescein, it is impossible to measure the shape of the sclera when you rely on profilometry. That means that we are measuring the concentration of fluorescein within the tear layer. So it is important to make sure that the tear layer is in a good condition. So often we do see that you have to take care of your dry eye patients. That means instruct them to use drops, or at the moment that they come in, before you take the measurement, already use a drop just to make sure that the eye is getting wet. So we rely on fluorescein and we rely on a good tear layer. It is important to use much more fluorescein than you do with your classical approach when you're using a slit lamp. So that means that we recommend using 1 or 2 drops, really soak and wiggle the strip so it's absorbing all the fluorescein within the orange part, and instill it on the eye. Start inferior, keep it there for a moment so it has time to absorb all the fluorescein into the tear layer, and then ask the patient to look down, instill superior as well, and after that check the temporal side, because often the temporal side is the driest part of the eye. So double check always the temporal side to make sure that fluorescein is all over. Taking the measurement itself is really fast. So the longest, the most time you need is just for preparation. So setting up the patient, instill the fluorescein, and instructing the patient. So give it a time. But taking the measurement, it's just a split second. So it's just lining up what you see in this image. So we For the going left, right, forwards, backwards, we rely on this image. That means you have these red circles. You have to align them as good as possible with the Purkinje dots. So that means going left or up and down. And we have these two white dots on the right side, and they have to be aligned above each other. They are moving from left to right, indicating you're too far away or too close, and you just go closer until they are above each other.
With just a little bit of experience, that is a very quick operation.
Yeah, true. And we will always come and train you for half or full a day. So we spend a lot of time making sure that you understand all the process. In the beginning, it's taking you time, especially because you have to instill the fluorescein, check all the quadrants of the eye. But taking the measurement itself, it's really easy. Yeah, I told this already, but how we instruct it to do it is if you pull down the eyelashes, so really grab the eyelashes and pull down the eyelid and use the orbital bone to hold the eyelashes. At that moment, you're not pressing on the eyeball, so it's not sensitive, not painful for the patient. And the same way you can do it, opening the superior eyelid, and then you have enough room to measure the 20 millimeters. All right. I also want to talk about the data we gather. I'm not going into detail on all the data, but I've taken 5 topics which I believe are the most relevant, especially in relation to scleral lens fitting. And let's start with SAC. SAC, or sagittal height, is the measurement we take. So all the data we gather is the sagittal height. But the sagittal height itself is really hard to see what am I looking at. So the real sagittal height measurement is the image you see on the left. Every eye looks more or less the same, like this image. So in this image, you cannot tell me what is the condition of this eye. On the right side, you see a best fit sphere. And on the best fit sphere, you see all those colors coming up, red spots, blue areas. So in this example, you can see already that you have this red area, which is a central cone. And you can also see this red white area, which is a pinguecula. But what is that map? That map is a bisphere elevation map. To see details on a sagittal height map, you always have to fit a best fit sphere. And we fit 2 best fit spheres. We fit 1 best fit sphere for the cornea, so for the central part of the measurement, and the second best fit sphere is for the sclera. If you look at this cross section down here, you can see that this green dotted line is the best fitting sphere for the cornea, and the yellow dotted line is the best fit sphere for the sclera. If you do this, everything which is elevated, so above the best fit sphere, will be colored red, or if it's even more elevated, it will be white. If it's below the best fit sphere, it will be blue. So what you can see in this map, the central cone, which is elevated, you see this pinguecula on the right side, which is extremely elevated, and we also see this red ring. This red ring does not mean this is exactly the HVID. It is in the location of the HVID, but it is the junction between the 2 best fitting spheres. So it is the junction between the cornea and the sclera. The biosphere map itself is very useful for diagnosing local elevations, like the Pinguecula in this example, or the central cone. And it's also good to see, am I looking at spherical or more toric-shaped sclera? And I made a summary of the conditions, and this is not a complete list, but I think this will cover most of the things you might see. So if you look at the central part of the measurement, so the corneal measurement we have taken, this is the way how a normal spheric eye will look like, or a prolate eye. It has softer colors compared to all the other conditions you see here. So no extreme red colors, no extreme blue colors. It's more or less symmetrical in appearance. So you see a green-yellow area, which means it is not really elevated or depressed. And something which looks like a cone, but it has soft colors. So this is not a cone, but this is the normal prolate shape of a spheric eye. A normal toric eye with the rule looks like this. You have the flat meridian, so which is colored red, is elevated above the best fit sphere. And you have the steep meridian, vertical, which is blue, so that means that it is below the best fitting sphere. Central cone, I showed it already before, but you just see a red cone in the center. And if you look at an inferior cone, or in this example, a PMD, you see the cone being inferior from the apex. And the apex is, we show it with this gray circle on the gray line. The last example is an oblate eye. Often it is post-LASIK or whatever other, whatever happened. But you often see this arc-shaped or semi-arc-shaped ring appearance, and then the flatter, depressed area in the center. I'm going to the next slide. Yeah. You also can look at the scleral shape, the scleral conditions. A spheric eye. So if you look at the sclera, this is more or less symmetrical looking. So no deep blue areas, not a lot of red areas, only this ring, but that's just the junction between the two areas. So we're looking outside that ring. So this is a spherical eye. Toricity the same, you can see on the sclera. This is the flat meridian, and vertical, this is the steep meridian. An oblique eye just rotated, so the flat meridian and the steep meridian. The last condition you will see pretty often is irregular. So in this example, you cannot see anything which is looking symmetrical. So you see this red area here, so elevated. On the left side, something elevated, inferior, something lower, and on the top here as well. So this is not really, you can say this looks toric with or against the rule or spheric. So I call it irregular. You can also observe local elevations. Typically, these are pingueculas, one, or in this example, two pingueculae, or a bleb, which is often located superior, larger in size. So you see that it is colored white, so it's really elevated and it's pretty white. We also have tangent angles maps. they are different from bisphere maps. And what are you looking at? If the color is blue, you're looking at a flat area, so no slope at all. If it becomes green, you're on a gentle slope. And if it's red, it becomes a steep slope. So what do you see in this example? 3 quadrants are rather steep, and this nasal superior quadrant is much flatter. The image you look at now is the same as the one I showed before for the oblique toric eye. And what's the strength of the tangent angles map? It's more a differentiation between is this eye more a toric eye, or does it look much more like quadrant specific? So the sensitivity for tangent angles map is not recognizing is this a spheric shaped eye or a toric shaped eye, but more do I see one quadrant which is more flattened, so the nasal flattening often you will see. So it's sensitive for seeing one quadrant being flatter than the other 3 quadrants. So these are the 3 conditions you may see with the tangent angles map. The nasal flattening, often you see it on the nasal side and slightly superior, so in this area. No nasal flattening, so it's more or less looking the same. I've never seen a perfect symmetrical tangent angle map, so I always will see it being slightly orange, but perfectly red all around. I've never seen it. The last one is interesting because this is a lens imprint. Then you often see a ring shape appearance, which is flatter than all the area around. And you may see this when the lens has not been removed too long ago. So I always recommend to check it so that you have a feeling for do I have to wait before I take a new measurement or when I start fitting new scleral lenses. So far, I've been showing how the maps look like. Those color maps give you a feeling for how the eye looks like, but it does not give you really how should I design a lens. Therefore, you really need the numbers. We offer 2 ways to design lenses. You can do it with the sagittal height tool. And that's the way you can design lenses manually, so all the way by yourself, or you rely on the automated first lens fit algorithms we provide as well. I believe it is good to have an understanding about this sagittal height tool because all the automated algorithms are related or doing the same as the sagittal height tool can do. So let me explain how it works. Sagittal height always has a relation with a chord length. So talking about sagittal height without mentioning the chord length is not possible. In this example, I've been taking a chord length of 16 millimeters. At the moment that you do that, we provide a lot of data. I will focus on these 3 numbers. So the 360, which is the mean sagittal height of the eye over a 16 millimeter chord. The T-sec and sec is the difference between the nasal and the temporal side. So in this example, we're showing 250 microns of difference between the nasal and the temporal sec. You can also see this visualized in this cross-section, where you see that the blue dotted line on the temporal side is slightly deeper than the one on the nasal side. For me, the most important values are the min and the max sec, because the difference between these two is the amount of toricity in sec. And I have an example here. So if I should do a design, a very simple design of a scleral lens with a 16 millimeter cord, I should work it out this way. I will look at the average sagittal height at 60 millimeters. In this example, it's 4,300 microns. I will add 100 microns of settling, as well as 300 microns of apical clearance, if I choose to use to have 300 microns of apical clearance. So that's up to what you prefer to do. In total, this makes 4,700, so that would be my lens to start with. I also have to include the toricity for the landing zone. While we know that 80% of the lenses should have a certain amount of toricity, I especially took an example with a low amount of toricity. So I take the max sec, so the highest sagittal height of this eye, which is 4,400. You can see it down here as well, 4,410. And the min sec, which is 4,300. The difference between is the amount of scleral toricity and is the number that I will use to design a scleral lens. I do rely on the first lens fit algorithms a lot, but often I check a number of chord lengths as well before I start choosing what lens, what design do I want to work with. I've chosen these chord lengths because they are more or less generic for every lens type. And let me explain the three I use. 9 millimeter chord length, I chose it because this is more or less the size of the optical zone. Some designs use 8 millimeters for the optical zone, some 10, but 9 is more or less in the middle. 13 millimeters is the place where a lens starts to land on the eye. Let me visualize it. So 13 millimeters, yeah, some designs at 12, some at 14, but 13 is more or less the place where the lens starts to land on the eye. What you see with a lot of scleral designs is that they have a spherical optical zone, spherical transition zone, so spherical limbal zone, and a toric landing zone. What I see very often is that also this point where the lens starts to land is already very toric. So in that moment, I will choose another design which is offering toric limbal options. I also check 15 millimeter chord lengths for two reasons. One, this is more or less in the middle of the landing zone. This is the place where you want to have a smooth, uniform alignment between the sclera and the landing zone. And beside of that, 15 millimeters is also the chord length where we have data published. So if you want to compare this eye with the mean eye, you have to check it on a 15 millimeter chord.
So I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to thank Rainier for this level of detail. We've gone back to the basics of the software and the instrument to build up to the first fit algorithm. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't need to worry about this level of detail for the average usage of an ESP. It's more for learning, and obviously there's going to be situations where you got to dig in a little deeper, but you don't need to go into this level of detail for most fits. Is that fair, Rainier?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was thank you for basically I was now going to first lens fit algorithms. I was going to say you can forget all these steps and uh, you can just rely on the automated algorithms. Um, so
Now,
what?
if
Yeah,
if for some bizarre reason you decide to get another instrument, not an Eaglet ESP, you better be used to this level of detail because you're going to have to talk to them in this language. But anyway, go ahead, Rainier.
yeah, I will. Um, so the first lens fit algorithms will help you choosing the best uh, uniform aligning base curve. So that relates to the 9 millimeters I was just talking about before. The sac of the lens, um, and the best aligning landing zone, as well as the amount of landing zone toricity. And we can do every part of this. So base curve, sac, landing zone, we can all do it in spherics, torics, or even quadrant specific. So how does it work? After a few slides, I will switch to the live software, just showing how it really goes, but let me explain it with a few slides. Um, you have to start selecting what supplier do you want to use. Then you have to select which lens type, and you have to select a diameter. You click calculate, and it will take about 30 seconds because we sent all the sagittal data to our server. We do the calculation process and we send back the information. So on the left side, you see the information we send back. So here it is predicted to use a volt of 4,450. Best base curve is 8.5. Meridian 1. So I've been choosing a quad specific design here. So it's showing 4 meridians, and the 4 meridians are related like this. Meridian 1 is superior, meridian 2 is on the right side, 3 inferior, and 4 on the left side. So in this example, you can see that it is following the shape of this toric eye. So meridian 1 and 2 are the vertical meridians, so they are steeper, steep 2 and steep 4. And meridian 2 and 4 are flat, flat 7, and flat 6. The algorithms will also predict what will be the alignment of the lens. So the fit axis is referring to what is the flat meridian. So in this example, we've been using a toric 1 fit, and the flat meridian is predicted to be at 9 degrees, a flat 2, and the steep meridian, a steep 1. Some algorithms will show a lot of detail and some will show just a couple of values. It depends on the design, the possibilities it has, and the range it's going to offer. I've been talking about flattest meridian already, and now I will switch to some live examples. Give me a moment to do that. So I'm in the first example. I've been using this example already in the presentation before. So this is the
This is now the live software. That's
yes,
where
it is. Yes, it is. Yeah, and to show how it's working, the biosphere elevation map is the first place the software is starting at the moment that you opened a measurement. So this is the place where you can just see how it looks like. Down here is the sagittal height tool, which I went into detail too much. And the first lens fit button, I just clicked it. It's just on the left side of the screen. And I already selected a supplier. I already selected I wanted to use a normal Zen lens design. You can see they offer a lot of options. I've been choosing a 16 millimeter.
Now you'll see on the right side of the screen, we give you HVID. So if you use HVID to select diameter, it's right there on the right side.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah. So actually, I've been choosing incorrect because I should have been taking a 17 millimeter because the recommendation from Bausch is above 11.8, go to a 70 millimeter. But for the example, it does not change anything. The algorithm itself has been returning these values, so a sagittal height of 4,700, so you do not have to include any more settling or apical clearance. The recommended apical clearance by the lab is used to calculate what will be the best lens. So it might be that the lab is recommending use 300 microns, but you feel for I need to take care of oxygen, so I want to go to 200 microns of apical clearance. At that moment, you may decide I will go for 4,600. The base curve is predicted as well, and you see that in this example, this is more or less spheric. But the interesting thing, this is a very steep eye. So with the normal diagnostic lens, you may see excessive clearance of the APS, the landing zone of this lens. So it is predicting go for both meridians 8 steps steeper. I will show another example. So a Boston Sight. With Boston Sight, the diagnostic lens is always a quad-specific lens. So the recommendation will be quad-specific as well. And we use a reference lens. That means that we've taken the lens in the middle of the set, and we just say go 100 microns lower for the sagittal height. So the diagnostic lens is slightly too large, so go a little lower. The base curve is predicted, and 4 haptics, so 4 landing zones. The haptic 1, which is on the top, it says go 250 microns flatter. For haptic 2 on the right side, go 50 microns steeper. On the bottom, 700 microns steeper. Well, that makes sense because we see this blue area, which means this is depressed. So it's a steep area. So the final lens can use a much steeper landing zone to have a better centration. And for haptic 4, go 450 microns steeper. I will look at the chat box. Is there anyone with a question about this first example? And otherwise, I will switch to the second example. I will go on. And this is my favorite example to show the need for scleral profilometry, so that the measurements we make. What we look at is an extreme scleral example. It is toricity with the rule. So what I've been showing here already, you can see this red dotted line, and it's shown in the cross section as well. So that's the flat meridian, as well as the steep meridian, which is the blue line down here. And I've also taken a chord length of 70 millimeters. And now it is interesting to look at the difference between the flattest and the steepest meridian. So I will say it, 4,900 minus 4,000 means that we're looking at a toricity of 900 microns. This was such an extreme example that we had to switch to using the numbers instead of relying on the first lens fit algorithms, because we were beyond the ranges of most of the lenses. So we had to consult all the labs and ask, what can you do? This is my favorite example to show the need for it. Excuse me. So instead of using that extreme example, I took a similar looking eye, so toricity with the rule, but about 300 microns of toricity instead of 900. So this is the starting screen. I use the first lens fit algorithms. In this example, I already prepared a Blanchard 1 fit with a small 14.5 diameter. It is predicting the base curve as well as a flat 2 and a steep 1 for the landing zone, or the edge, how Blanchard is calling it. I can show another example, for example, a Zenlens quad. So at this moment, it is pushing out the measurement data, the 500,000 measurement points. It requires a little calculation, and then it's sending back the information. So this is the information we got returned. So a SEC 4,450, base curve 8.5. The APS1 and the APS3 are the vertical meridians, so they are is predicted as steep 2 and steep 4. And for APS2 and 4, so the flat meridian, a flat 7, and a flat 6. We offer something more, and this is the over refraction tool, which we show on the right side. And the prediction of the algorithm was use a sagittal height of 4,450 for your final lens. Well, if you want to look in your diagnostic set, the first lens you find is a 4,500. So that will be the lens you use on the eye. The standard base curve of this diagnostic lens is 7.6. So I'm filling in here at the base curve 7.6. The spherical power of your diagnostic is -2. The rotation was already predicted by the algorithm, so it is predicting 180. The best fit base curve is also already there because it's taken from the predictions. And now you only have to do your over refraction. So let's say you measure -3. And down here you find the results, so the values you need to order the lens.
Nice.
Any questions about the last two examples? And I have one more to go.
That's a new feature. Hopefully we're going to roll it out at GSLS, but yeah, that's cool.
We will. I will switch to the last example. And this is the most complex example. I am in the biosphere elevation map, and beside of just predicting the best fitting lens with a spheric, toric, or quadrant specific landing zone design, you often need something more, especially when you're dealing with pingueculas. So I have here this example with the extreme pinguecula, and you can see now that I'm moving around with my mouse, and I have this mouse over this gray box, which with a lot of numbers. I will zoom in, and all these numbers, I will use it to design, in this example, a microvolt from a Zen lens, but you can do it for For the Zen lens, you can do it with a Boston scleral, and you can also do it with labs like, help me out, AccuLens. Yeah, that's the one. I will switch back to my presentation and show into detail how I use these numbers. If you want to order a microvolt, you have to give them four parameters. So the axis, the decentration, the width, and the depth. You see that I've enlarged here this gray box, and we're going to use it to order these values. The first thing that you do with your mouse is finding what is the center, the apex of the microvolt of the pinguecula, sorry. At the moment that you find it, you keep it there, you do not move it, and you start looking at what do I have to calculate. We have to start with the, let me see, it's changed. We start with the axis. The axis is given here, 352 angle. So that's the angle compared to the horizontal meridian going here. In this example, I say that the rotation of the lens is 10 degrees. With this simple calculation, you know what axis you have to order for a microvolt. I will go to the second value. The decentration, you can just read it from this number, because this last number you find here is the distance away from the apex. So this distance is 8.5. So that means that you will design the center of this microvolt on the edge of the lens. The third value is the depth. And the depth is given here. It's 400 microns, 410 microns. I always recommend to keep a gentle touch. So I always reduce it with 50 microns. So my order would be 350 microns of depth. For the last value, you have to move your mouse. And in the beginning, you move it to the top of the pinguecula, so where the yellow area starts. And you keep in your mind this number, so 0.8. And I've written it down here. Then you move it to the bottom, so where the pinguecula stops, and you read this number, 3.2. You add it together, and the total width of your order will be 4 millimeters. So here I've just added it all together. So the axis 342, decentration, depth, and the width. Is there any question about this example? Because I've been reaching the end of my presentation.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was a good deep dive and top level. Yeah, that was cool. I'll jump in. I'm gonna try very hard to finish up before 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I think I should be able to do that with no problem. And again, if you guys have any questions, jump in and type them out. We got a chat. How do you know the apex is correct? From Kyriakos.
Yeah. You go around with your mouse and you find the highest location. Often you see that there is a difference of 10 microns, but 10 microns is the conjunctiva, so it's fluffy. Being off 10 microns more or less is no issue. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is that answers the question. Thank you. So I'm going to wind things up. I'm going to try and go pretty quick here, but jump in and hit chat or hit questions if you want to slow me down. So I'm going to go through the reality of lab neutrality. I'm a poet and I don't even know it. Working with our partner labs, a quick return on investment, typical installation. I wanted to walk you through what a typical installation looks like and then next steps. So having said that, lab neutrality. We have more than, as we mentioned, we have more than 37 lens designs from more than 17 labs. So we consider ourselves lab neutral. Anybody that wants to work with us, we'll work with. And we're not selling the SP to push any particular design. We're selling the SP to allow you to fit whatever you want. And the interest in working with us has gotten significantly more important over the last 2 years as scleral topography has taken off, and these guys know this is the direction the world's going in, and they all want to have an algorithm in our device. So let's take a quick look at the list, and I'll just buzz you through this real quick. Hopefully you can see this well enough. Let me expand a little bit. I'm not going to read them all off, but I'll slowly scan through the list of current algorithms, and the list is always growing. So we have not only sclerals, we have ortho K, we have hybrids, we have corneal GPs, but in the U.S., obviously the focus is on scleral lenses. Right or wrong?
Yeah, and hybrids.
And hybrids.
Yeah, the focus is on sclerals and hybrids, but I do have soft lens algorithms as well as RGPs.
So if anybody wants to have that list, I'll be happy to email you a link to that list. Okay. So how do we work with our partner labs, and how do you work with the partner labs? So with 17 partner labs growing, we're a small company. It's been a challenge to keep up with these labs, but nevertheless, we're focused on making sure that their consultation team, at a minimum, is well schooled on what's going on with ESP and understands the data and understands the imagery, so that a practitioner could share a file with a lab, and you guys could have a conversation about what you see on the screen, just like we did this morning with Rainier. So most of the labs have what I call an ESP consultative expert, and I'll use Alden B&L as an example. Andy Taddeo is the consultative expert at B&L for ZenLens and ZenRC, and we're gonna in early December train a couple more guys, so we have a bigger team over there. But anyway, so there's people that understand what's going on with the ESP. And some of the labs have an ESP in-house, which I hope you would agree with me, suggests that they know more about it than we could possibly train. That includes Boston and Blanchard. Hopefully Paragon has one. B&L has one via Indiana University and Jason. So anyway, we're working with these guys. And when we do an ESP install, we'll discuss your favorite designs and make sure you're connected with the right experts so that everybody's in the loop as to who's fitting what and who has what instrument. So quickly on the return on investment. So I've run this by most of the users that I've talked to, and they agree that more or less they're in agreement that more or less this is fairly accurate. That if your average fits are going to go from about 3.5 before you have an ESP to about 1.5 when you have an ESP. That's per eye. Fits lenses per eye. So I've built an ROI based on that assumption. And let's take a look at that. I'll quickly run you through. So I took a conservative example suggesting your average fits per week are two scleral fits per week. You get about $1,500 per fit. The time per visit's 45 minutes. That's across the entire team. If you stick to the 3.5 lenses per eye, you're looking at 2.5, a little over 2.5 hours per fit, and you're looking at about $3,000 in revenue per week, or $150,000 per year. Now, if you have an ESP, you're going to still fit 2 patients, but you're only going to take 1.5 visits per patient, which means your total time per fit drops to 1.1, a little over an hour. Your revenue remains the same, 2 patients, same revenue, but you can use that time the three freed up hours to fit more patients. That's going to add $4,000 per week to your revenue. That's going to add $200,000 to your revenue per year for the freed up time, which means that you're going to turn the investment in the ESP around in a little less than 2 months. Very, very fast. Now, there's a lot of assumptions in here, but I think what I'm trying to demonstrate is this unit will pay for itself very quickly. I think when I used to run a small business, I would look for something less than a year return on investment. Clearly, we're there even with a conservative 2 fits per week. So I hope that is in agreement with you guys. So let's jump back to my presentation and we'll stick here for the rest of the thing. So now I'm talking about the installation. So the average installation looks like this. We typically dedicate a full day. We don't need a full day, but we're there for you, and we'll do it the way that is convenient for your practice. Obviously, we're going to go in. We're going to unpack the unit. We ask you guys to leave the unit in the box until we get there, because God forbid if there's any damage in shipping, we don't want to get in an argument about how we handle it and who's responsible. We want to unpack the box and take control of that step of the thing. Now you can open the box up and you can look at it, but we ask that you leave it in the box. We'll set it up. We'll train the techs on image acquisition. That usually takes a better part of an hour. You can sit in on that, or you can leave that to us and the tech. So it's your call. And then we'll train the team on the software. So go through the software like we did this morning with Rainier. Get into all that stuff, and then after lunch, we typically like to have 2 or 3 patients stop in and go through the process with live patients. And that's where you really learn. We'll stand in the background and you guys will run the show, and we'll professionally jump in where we need to. But that's been a very, very instructive part of the installation. And typically we're out of there about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But again, we've got all day. And then typically what we do is to schedule a webinar 2 to 3 weeks out to cover everything that you guys questions that popped up after we left, just the average issues. We'll take a look at your MSR files and make any suggestions about how you could get better imagery, all that stuff. So there's only so much that we're going to be able to do on day one, but obviously things are going to get more interesting as we go out. And if you have an emergency question or you're confused about anything, we're always there. We're not going to wait for 3 weeks for a webinar, but we like to have a webinar to review where you guys stand and what questions you have. So with that, if there's any questions, jump on the chat. And it doesn't look like there's anything yet. So next steps, we're typically at the major US meetings, and I'll let Rainier and Arnie jump in if they want to talk about the worldwide stuff. GSLS, ICSC, Vision by Design, American Optometry are 4 basics. We go to a couple more meetings typically than that, but we're looking forward to GSLS next January. We're working on a big city tour. So if you live in a large metro or near a large metro, there's a good chance next year you're going to see us there to see a live demo. And obviously we can set up one-on-one online demos. We'd be happy to send you a quote. Here's my email address. And I want to thank everybody for joining me. So let's hang on for a minute and you guys can jump in. If you're still online and you want to ask any questions, go for it. I'm going to share the recording with everybody, including the folks that were on the webinar, so you can watch it again if you fell in love with it. And I hope the Americans on the line have a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Rainier. Thank you, Arnie. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Kyriakis. Thank you, Dr. Levine. We'll be in touch. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too, Tom.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.